It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com. Purple Daily, presented by Surly Brewing Company.
And welcome into Purple Access. Judd Zolgad, Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune sports columnist, Declan Goff, executive producing, sponsored as always by our friends at Surly Brewing and also TCL. If you're not watching sports on a TCL or heck, movies or anything else you enjoy, what do you do? And TCL is the way to go. Chip Scoggins, last week we went through your 6 favorite regular season Vikings games. We excluded playoffs that you have covered since you joined me on the beat and then obviously transitioned to a columnist role after that. This week you have come up with your 8 favorite Vikings storylines during your time on the beat. And the caveat this week is no Favre, because any Favre storyline would have absolutely dominated. And we all know the Brett stories. So if you would like to, you can start at 8 and work through, and I don't know if this was tough or not, but work through your storylines.
Well, they were tough because the Love Boat and Whizzinator predated me, so I didn't get those two gems. Those would have been obvious ones, right?
Yes.
So much like last week, I'll say my list is not necessarily. They could be quirky, right? Storylines that are quirky,
whatever you
goofy,
choose,
drama. So I have a mixed bag. Some obvious, some not so obvious. So without further ado,
there you go. It's the quickest drum of all time.
Number 8. Troy Williamson challenges Brad Childress to a fight at the 50-yard line.
Oh, that's right. Jacksonville.
Well, this was 2008, after Troy's not so glamorous time with the Vikings at end. He was in Jacksonville, and he told a reporter down there that he wanted to meet Childress at the 50-yard line. The Vikings were playing down there, and Troy wound up not playing in the game, right? I think he might have been hurt or what, but he wanted them to meet at the 50-yard line to settle their differences. And Childress, didn't brush it off. He gave one of my 2 favorite Childress quotes. Asked about Childress, said that he is 190 pounds of twisted steel, romping, stomping dynamite.
Yep.
So he was ready to go. That's one of my 2 favorite Childress quotes. The other one is it when they won the division, when he said he was going to drink a vodka the size of your head.
They just moved into first place, I think, for the first time in his tenure. And I said, did you do something to, mark the fact that you've now got this team in first place? And that's when I got, I'm going to drink a vodka the size of your head, Judd. Which, you know what, he might have. I don't know.
I think Brad liked his. Our photographer, Carlos Gonzalez, always used to bring. He makes his own great salsa, and Childress found this out. So I think Carlos brought him some of his chips and salsa down to training camp. And I think Brad liked to have a little vodka and chips and salsa at night after a long day on the Mankato fields. But I don't. the end of the Williamson era, if that's what we would call it, did him and Childress spar verbally on the way out the door?
Well, I think the main breaking point there, besides the fact that Troy couldn't catch a football, which is a big problem in football, I think
when you're a receiver.
I think the main breaking point, I think the year before you joined me on the beat when it was still me and Seifert, Troy Williamson's grandmother died.
Oh,
and he was gone for an extended period, and then he extended his absence. And I think the Vikings are like, we're not going to pay you now. We're going to stop paying you. And it was this big, probably unnecessary. It got, if not ugly, certainly debatable. So I think that's where there was a main falling out, because Brad became upset that Troy didn't come back quicker.
Yeah. And
something like that.
Childress was 190 pounds of twisted steel, romping, stomping down. I love that quote. So
that's a great football coach line, because you ordinarily don't get that. That's a Rex Ryan, Mike Tice type of line.
That was so anti-Childress, a quote like that. So number 7, the Philadelphia trip from hell.
Oh my God! A lot of beer consumed on that trip. A lot of Yingling, as I recall.
So we leave on Christmas Day night, right? Or was it Christmas? Yes, Christmas Day night.
Yes.
Thinking, this will be get in, get out, we're home. Pack a couple change of underwear, a couple socks. The snowstorm that the blizzard of 2010 that was supposed to rock Philadelphia we get to the hotel in Philadelphia Christmas Eve night. We're having, some drinks in the hotel lobby bar. Some Vikings officials came down there. Brian Murphy, the specialty kicks coordinator, came and had a beer with us because I think he knew he was on the way out the door.
Yeah.
And we start hearing massive snowstorm. We're in trouble. This thing's not going to be played. So we panic. We spend the night there, but we panic. We check out of our hotel, drive and get a hotel out by the airport in case there's 9 feet of snow.
Yep.
They cancel the game, or they postpone the game. There's no snow. So we're there. That was a Sunday. They wound up playing that damn game on Tuesday night. Yep. I don't know that it ever snowed.
7 inches, I think, at the airport. I think they said 7 inches at the airport.
But that's where Judd and I did the smart thing. We checked out, went to the airport, got about 5 cases of beer, had them in the background of our Zoom call. Or not Zoom, our video. Our Access Vikings. We like to blur the lines and push the lines back then, but we thought that would be a little bit too much for Star Tribune to have a bunch of empty beer cans sitting by us.
We bought the I remember, I think we bought that hotel bar out and just said, give us all the beer left.
With Tom Pelissero.
They stuck it in a big Budweiser case. And that's what was in the background. And we're both like, we probably shouldn't do this. And so
we did it anyways.
But we had a full stock of beer.
That's right.
And I think we were afraid that we couldn't get out potentially to get the flight. And where we moved to also was basically across the street from the stadium, right?
Yes.
Because that's out by the airport in Philadelphia. So
and we were there. I remember we had to go back because then they kept having access back at the team hotel where we were at. So we went back down the next day and ran out of clothes. We had to go to a clothing store to get,
Modell's.
Yeah, Modell's.
Gotta go to Moe's.
Get T-shirts and underwear and all kinds of stuff. And then it was a wildly entertaining game where Fred Puckett brought the bleep it package and blitzed Antoine Winfield, I think, 19 times in that game off the edge. It was a brilliant game plan.
I've still always said that I think what solidified Frazier in getting the job full-time for the next season was that game.
Yeah.
Because he did a brilliant job. 1, they won, but 2, that season was off the rails, and he actually held it together.
That was Michael Vick at the Eagles, right? And they brought Winfield off the blitz to just completely ruin their game plan. I mean, just absolutely ruined it. And who's quarterbacking for
Joe Webb?
Joe Webb, yeah.
It's Joe Webb.
Joe Webb.
Joe Webb. The Philadelphia trip from hell. So that made the list.
All right.
Number 6, I'm kind of doing them in different order. Number 6.
Yes.
Case Keenum comes to the rescue in 2017, right? That season looked doomed.
Yep.
Is that Teddy in the preseason? No, he played. Is that Teddy? That's the year he got hurt in the preseason. Bradford.
No, that was 16, right?
16, yeah. So, but Teddy played
17,
one game that year.
Bradford played the opener. They beat the Saints at US Bank Stadium, right?
Yeah, and he started the next game, right?
No, he got. They basically said something happened in that Saints game, and he's not going to play. If I'm not mistaken, week 2 was in Pittsburgh, and Case they lost.
Yeah,
and that's where what you just said is exactly correct. We're all like, they're screwed.
Yeah, and they went 13-3.
After that, bang, they took off.
Yeah, 13-3 Case. We thinking this is going to be a disaster. He plays has a career year, a fun season, 13-3. Teddy actually. Did he get in one game at the end of that year?
Bengals.
Yeah.
As a kind of a welcome,
Bengals.
Yeah. So, but that turned out to be an unexpected fun ride in some of the performances Case had. And,
yes.
So that deserves 6 on the list. Number 5. And some of these are not necessarily storylines, but more. Here's number 5. Mike Zimmer versus kickers.
It became a storyline. It just moved around.
That's right.
From year to year to year.
Mike Zimmer's hatred of kickers.
Yep.
I mean that has to be on the list because of Blair Walsh, Daniel Carlson, Dan Bailey. I've never seen a head coach that despised kickers probably as much as he did, and had as much Probably some of it bad luck, some of it the pressure, unnecessary pressure he put on him caused a lot of the problems. The Daniel Carlson thing was a debacle from start to finish. I mean,
yes,
from drafting him to, Zimmer probably hated that, to going for a 2-point conversion in the first preseason game after Carlson misses an extra point, and Zimmer saying he was mad at him, so he was that thing was over at that point, cutting him after. I mean, that was part of a defining part of his legacy, I think. Zimmer, not the biggest part, obviously, but
unfortunately, yeah, it's definitely a storyline. And I think, to answer your question, I think Tice hated kickers too, and he was weird with them as well.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, one of the smartest things that Childress did upon being hired was that March they signed Longwell.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm not going to put up with crap. That to me was one of the smartest things, because I think he knew we should pay a guy who we can trust.
Yeah.
And Ryan, you could trust.
Well, I think but even when the Vikings did that under Zimmer, it seemed to go haywire, right? Dan Bailey, you thought they were going to be able to trust him, and
that's true. Yeah,
that one was.
And Kai Forbath,
it was good. They should just.
He missed extra point attempts at times, but as far as a field goal kicker, he was actually effective. I never understood why they just didn't leave that one alone.
Was it because of the extra points?
Yeah, that drove Mike crazy too. But guys are missing them.
Guys are missing
them. They miss them.
Yeah, because they moved it back. I mean, they're missing him. So, in retrospect, they should have just kept him. Probably would have had the occasional missed extra point that drove Zimmer crazy, but it created this just constant thing. It was always a thing, that he could never escape. So,
and the Carlson thing, because of how well he kicked for the Raiders, looks awful today.
Well, and that's where you need a GM and say, Mike, as horrific as that was at Green Bay, we're going to try to navigate this. But I don't know that it would have been salvageable with Zimmer. It just he clearly ruined the kid's confidence early on, So that's on the list.
Okay.
Where am I at? Am I at number 4?
You're at 5.
I'm at 5.
Yep, you just did 6.
I just did 6. Zimmer, Cousins, Spielman thing. What do we call it? What do we call that? Zimmer, Cousins, Spielman.
Dissension?
Three's Company?
Yeah. Again,
I mean, that was a whole. It obviously came to a head in the last year, but it was part of. It was the whole time, right? The whole time they were together.
Mm-hmm.
Does he like him? Does he not like him? Did he want him to make that call to bring him in? It was just it was a weird relationship between. You would think in a healthy NFL situation, at least the coach and quarterback are symbiotic, same page. Yeah. You would think that the GM, the coach, and the quarterback, the three most important people in a NFL organization, and you had just complete dysfunction between the three most important people, and
Absolutely.
it was something that just kept simmering. And a lot of it probably we had no clue about, but you knew when Cousins is bringing up, I had to beg the head coach to have talks with me, weekly talks, and we don't really communicate, that something was amiss.
And in some ways, it's funny, Chip, because Kirk Cousins and the kickers that you just talked about were in the same predicament, which was involved in the middle of a battle they couldn't control between Rick and Mike. Because, in both cases, I mean, the Carlson pick, make no mistake, was Rick trying to be smart. Yes. And he was. Unfortunately, he never should have made that pick, because why are you giving a guy who hates kickers, and especially young kickers, right? Yeah. And, we've talked about this before, but to go back to the combine in 18 before Kirk Cousins signed, Zimmer basically came out and said, don't do that. Don't pay a quarterback. And then Rick's like, oh, no, I'm going to pay a quarterback. So it's interesting that really, in a lot of ways, the main combatants were Rick and Mike, and the player who was in question was caught in the middle of that battle.
Well, and Mike's motivation was, let's not take money away from my defense.
Correct.
Let's not tie up so much. And in today's NFL, you have to, unless you hit on your rookie, you're going to tie up money in your quarterback. And so it was, they started at a bad spot. I'm not sure I don't know that we knew really the degree to which Mike opposed it.
Right.
But that should be number one probably on the list because it lasted so long. But I got three more. Here, right?
Yeah, four more.
No,
4 more.
Yeah.
I thought you just did 5.
Childress was 8, 7.
You miscounted, Judd. He's got 3 more.
3 more. Okay.
I got three more. Number 3,
Yep.
Adrian Peterson's MVP season in pursuit of Eric Dickerson. Record.
Great one.
That was fun to cover the whole season, particularly as it got to the latter stages and you realized, hey, he's in the MVP discussion and this doesn't happen for running backs and he's going to have a chance at this rushing record. We talked about last week with that Green Bay game at the season finale where he came up 8 yards short, but basically all but solidified his getting the MVP season. But that's, that season coming off the ACL and the fast recovery and everything, still one of the top, maybe the top individual, season, not just one game, but just individual athletic feats that I've covered.
Absolutely. And he took a team too that had I think it's fair to say questionable quarterback play and carried it as a running back.
Yeah.
Now that's a different time, but it's not that long ago. And to carry that team on so many weeks when the quarterback couldn't.
Yeah.
Damn. Yeah, no, that's as much as I object to how Peterson won't go away now, and clearly the off the field stuff has certainly had an impact on how we feel about him. That season is one of the more remarkable years that I've seen, both from a fan standpoint and since I began to cover this team. Falls below probably Moss in his first year. But damn, it's up there.
And I remember distinctively standing over there talking to Leslie Frazier at the old Winter Park outside, and Adrian was running that hill. The hill that the rehab guys it's a steep hill outside Winter Park. It's a hill. It was a bank, and guys would run with coming off injury or they just run a fracture conditioning. And I remember talking to Les about he had ACL surgery, and remember back then the whole thing was getting it real stiff. They made it was a completely polar opposite of what they do now. But we were watching and Peterson just running up and down the hill on his rehab with Sugarman over watching. It's like, this is different. Had no idea he was going to have the kind of season he had. But that especially coming off the injury is what made that so unique. And then to watch him carry that team to the playoffs was pretty incredible. And it'll be interesting to see 15 years from now, like what will people remember about Peterson? Will they remember that?
It depends on when you saw him.
Yeah.
But when guys won't go away, that sticks in your memory bank because that's really the last thing, right? I think that there is going to be a large faction that their impressions of AP will be influenced by the fact that this guy will not retire.
That and off the field,
at
the end. I think that changed the perception of him in a lot of fans' eyes from just being a superstar running back to a complicated individual and complicated legacy here. So
right,
but that season was in totality was just incredible. So that was number 3. Number 2, the prodigal son returns. Randy Moss, 2010.
Oh yeah.
It was only 4 weeks, right?
Uh-huh.
But I remember sitting out at my son's soccer game and getting a text from you that Moss was returning, and just thinking, "Holy bleep, this is going to be massive." And I still remember his introductory press conference. Remember how he ended that?
Oh yeah, the boat.
Yeah, he said, "What if I'd been on that boat? There'd been some real problems."
Y'all lucky, and I knew they were in trouble when I looked, and in the back of the press conference was Wilf, and Ziggy's laughing uproariously. A few years after being just absolutely adamant that the boat thing was an embarrassment, this franchise couldn't tolerate, blah blah blah. Code of conduct, and now he's like laughing along and thinking it's so funny, and I was like, this ain't good. Like you can't be that up and down about life, my man.
Yeah, and he was so he started that way. Help me remind me again, what was the compensation for him?
It was a third round pick, I believe, went to the Patriots, and the Vikings got like a 7th round pick back.
Yeah, so not I guess.
No, the Patriots were going to dump him.
Yeah, but just it was 4 weeks of tension.
It's 4 weeks now that feels like it was about 3 months.
It was, because remember he did an opening press conference where if I'd been on that boat, and that was great. We all laughed. That was a great one-liner to end it. Then the Gus Tanucci's, which I actually walked in on at the end of, had no idea what was happening, but walked in just a split second because that was a Friday.
Yep.
Remember, for people to know, Fridays back then, Childress would have his end of the week thing in the field house, and then it basically opened the locker room for access simultaneously, and they'd bring catering food. And Judd had went to Childress, and I went to the locker room. And I walked in, and guys were – you could tell something. Randy was screaming. He was screaming at, like, Percy and Jamarcus Sanford, and he was saying something. I had no idea that he had been getting on Tanucci, like Gus Tanucci, for a minute before.
Yeah.
I just thought it was Randy being Randy, But we had that. But then and then he didn't do any other interviews. Remember, every day we'd go up to him and he would snarl at us or scream at us to get away. And so Judd took it upon himself. We turned him into the league because he's a superstar who was refusing interviews.
Yeah, you're supposed to talk.
So that led to a $10,000 fine going in the week of the Patriots, going back to play his team. And he totally dogs it on the could have been a touchdown pass and didn't go for it right down the sideline.
Yes.
And then gave the what was it? Was it the Moss? Was it a fade or something on there? He didn't go for. I can't remember. Maybe I'm just.
There was a play in Green Bay where he
maybe that's what it was.
Alligator armed a ball in the back of the end zone.
Maybe that's what it was.
That he would have caught 10 out of 10 times throughout the rest of his career.
Yeah, maybe that's.
He just was like, I'm not gonna go for that because
maybe that's what it was. But after the game, post game back then, it's still Childerson quarterback would go in the interview room outside of the next to the locker room. So Judd would sit in there, and then I worked the locker room. And Randy comes, he's getting dressed, and there's a big crowd gathering around. He's like, "Y'all don't need to be here. I'm going to the podium." And we're like, "Oh boy!" So I go in the room, and Judd and Seifert and guys are in there. What's going on? I said, "Moss said he's coming in here."
Yeah, that's right.
So,
I know, it's unbelievable. Thanked everyone with the Patriots down to the grounds crew.
He started with, "You guys got me fined $10,000, so there's no more interviews," that he was going to ask the questions and give the answers.
Yep.
No more interviews. And then he proceeded to basically say how much he loved the Patriots and just dumped on the Vikings and how they didn't take his advice or something for the game plan or whatever.
Yeah.
And,
yes.
And then, he finishes it with, "Bill Belichick, I salute you," and saluted him and walked. I was like, that felt like the point of no return, right? Like that this was not sustainable. This was not going to go forward. And we didn't know at the time, which he says you learned afterwards, that basically came in and screamed at the Wilfs to
fire Brad.
Fire Brad. So, that was just, I understand what they were doing, trying to recapture something. They were grasping at straws in a wild season that went way off the rails. But that was a huge story, for that month. and it did badly.
And that was what the next day. Brad cut him and didn't tell the owners.
Yeah,
And I mean that was the end for Brad, really.
yeah, they got Brad because then
Like-
the Wills flew because back then I think they were pretty much staying in New Jersey, but then they fly
Yep.
in to talk
Yep.
to Lieber and all those guys. Like, hey, what the heck's going? And Longwell and all these guys like, what the heck's going on?
And I think that was one too where if that team has a bad year, but Brad doesn't cut Moss or he cuts him and tells the Wilfs, I think Brad survives.
Probably,
But that whole thing got so toxic, and Moss deserves. I mean, 28 days of just chaos.
yeah. Just I mean,
Chaos.
was fitting. Chaos. Yeah. So that's number 2.
All right,
Number 1.
Chipper. Before we get to 1, let's talk about our favorite beer, huh?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Number 1 is sponsored by our friends at Surly Brewing. Now, Chip, I'd like to introduce you, and perhaps you've had one, to the Summer of Surly Darling, the Logic Bomb. It's fantastic. But I know that when push comes to shove, what is your choice when it comes to going to your local liquor store and picking up a Surly? What's your choice, Chipper?
It's Furious all day long, and I actually have to make a run today because I had 2 Surly Furiouses last night.
God,
I'd had a long day of reporting on the road, and I get home and I said, you know what? This is a 2 Surly Furious night here.
Ain't nothing wrong with that. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Nothing
I
to
didn't feel
apologize
guilty
for.
at all. The only thing I felt bad about is that was my last 2, so now I got to go to the store this afternoon to pick up more. So
Outstanding.
I got to get reinforcements. So
I like it. All right, what's number 1?
number 1 would make you furious if you're the Vikings. The Metrodome roof collapse. That storyline will live with me forever. It was the snapshot of a season that you couldn't possibly make up. It became the punchline to a season you couldn't possibly make up. If you ask any Vikings player about 2010, they'll say the roof collapsed, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's symbolic of how that entire thing went. I think I've told the story before, but that week I was doing the Sunday story to the advance for the Giants, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was so proud. I talked to the Vikings, convinced them to. Back then, in the locker room after games, they'd have a laundry hamper, like a rolling one.
Yep.
That you'd see like at hotels.
Yep.
And when guys were getting undressed, they'd throw them in one, but they had one specifically for the playbooks. These big thick binders that they would have. They'd look at them before the game, and then guys would throw their playbooks in that laundry hamper. So I talked to the Vikings, convinced them to let me do a story. How they create the game plan for that week, starting with the Sunday after a game when guys throw their game plan folders in that, or the 3 binders in that hamper. Start from then all the way up to game time. So we went day by day, and it was great. I mean, I talked to Bevel, all the offensive coaches, just about like each guy had a certain, like I think George Stewart, who was the wide receiver coach, he had the 3rd and long plays, and they each had a little thing, and they would add it, and down to the cards. Bevel gave me he spit out a play call for me. I was so proud of this. Like, here's how it looks. Tried to be inside ball, right?
Yes.
So I write this big story. It's running Sunday, and Kevin Seifert calls me at 6 a.m. He's like, "You watching TV?" I'm like, "Kevin, I'm sleeping." No. He's like, the dome collapsed. I'm like, "What?" So I turn on and Fox has the thing. I'm like, "Ain't nobody reading that story."
I don't remember that story, and it sounds like a great story. I should go back and find it and read it.
Nobody's reading that story.
I should go back and find that story.
Thus began one of the longest days of reporting. And it started then and ended with our flight pulling into the gate in Detroit at like midnight. Remember that?
Yep.
It was late. It might have been after midnight.
Yep.
To cover a home game against the Giants in Detroit today. I mean, you could not possibly make that up.
And that wasn't cheap for plane tickets because
No.
we literally, I think you got the plane tickets like at 2:00 that afternoon or something.
Yeah, because your first reaction is like, when you saw that video, you're like, huh, where are they going to play?
Right.
And so then we finally find out they're going to play in Detroit. But then that set off, the next week. Are they going to be able to clear TCF Bank Stadium? Hire all the workers to get because had to get the snow out, and then it was frozen.
Mayhem.
And then Chloe says somebody's going to die on this field, so the NFL flies in to say this is not going to work. The ground's frozen. Favre was in, then he was out. He was out, then he was in. Remember they declared him out
that day,
the Monday night, and then he comes back and gets his head slammed into turf. So so they had 3 games left, right? That one, the next one against the Bears, and then the final in Detroit, right?
In Detroit, I think that's right. Yeah.
Just an absurd 3 final weeks.
Yes.
That just.
Wait, no, 4 games left, right? Because Philadelphia was in there too.
Was it okay? Yeah, so Philadelphia squeezed in there. Yeah.
I think Philadelphia was the.
Well, it's Christmas. So.
Yeah. Yes. So they had Philadelphia, and the reason why they made the Vikings and Eagles wait till Tuesday night was because the network was so mad that the Vikings and Giants had played a noon Sunday game on Monday night.
Yeah.
And they're like, you ain't taking Monday night again. And they're like, okay, we're screwed. We'll take Tuesday night.
Yeah, it bumped up against them. So it went, Detroit or Giants at Detroit, and then they came back here. Next week was the Bears game, or was it?
Yep. That was like December 10th or something.
Yeah, and that was the game.
Yep.
So, they were paying students to get the snow out. And it was felt like it went right to the last minute that they were going to get all the snow out there. And then it was basically first come, first serve. I remember people just rushing into the stadium and grab whatever seats they could. And I don't know that we'll cover a weirder story than that.
Oh, you knock on wood, will never get a weirder season than that one. It was absolutely off the charts. All right, Chip Scoggins, great stuff. Fantastic. Right. Again, you come through, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right,
see you, brother.